Ocean Initiative that will help developing countries across the world to protect our oceans. I warmly welcome the producer tax. We need to get the deposit return scheme going. Actually, this is an area where I believe Scotland would be better off if they worked within the whole of the UK to introduce a scheme that worked for the whole of the UK. That would be better for industry and for consumers. Consumers want to see a step change in how we deal with single-use plastic. It needs to be across all areas, not just food. We need to work with producers, we need to work with consumers, and it would be better if the people of Scotland would be working with all of the UK to deliver it.
It's with great pleasure that I call Kenny MacAskill to make his maiden speech.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As is customary, but I believe correct, I start with a tribute to my predecessor. Martin Whitfield and I disagreed fundamentally on Scotland's constitutional situation, but in many other aspects we were at one. And I was conscious that he was tenacious in opposing Brexit, and he was equally assiduous in representing his constituency. So I know the standards that have been set by him, and he will continue to reside in the constituency, and I'll no doubt bump into him. But it was the same for those who went before him, because my own colleague George Kerrivan was equally assiduous, and prior to that it was Fiona O'Donnell, who continues to serve the county as a Labour councillor in East Lothian. It also goes all the way back to the late, great John P. McIntosh, who I think set the standards and the template that everybody who has represented East Lothian since has sought to aspire to. I do, as my colleague George Kerrivan pointed out, have a link to him, because an assiduous campaigner for JP McIntosh, and indeed who has sought to keep his memory alive, was Arthur Greenan, who was both a tenacious campaigner for George Kerrivan and equally vibrant for myself despite his age. Arthur's one of those that have made a political journey from being both a Labour activist and indeed a Labour voter to being an SNP activist and an SNP supporter. It's a journey made by many, and indeed one I tracked myself when I was privileged to write the biography of arguably Scotland's greatest ever MP who never was, the late great Jimmy Reid. But I touch upon my own constituency because it has endured changes, but it's also stayed the same in many ways. It continues to roll from the Lammermuir Hills to the banks of the Forth. It contains fertile land, bonny beaches and indeed fine folk. Some industries, such as mining, have gone. Other industries, such as renewables, have come, which is why it's important and appropriate that I'm making this speech at this juncture in the Queen's speech. You ones, as I say, have committed and we build round them, but it's still based around the vibrant towns and villages of both the historic county and the more wider modern constituency. Its people remain undiminished in their grit, determination and decency, and indeed I know as a new arrival their warm and welcoming nature as thousands seek to move to the expanding county of East Lothian. There are, though, historic links, not just from those who have been elected members in this institution with my constituency. When I first arrived here last month, I came across a statue of Oliver Cromwell. Oliver Cromwell is well known in my constituency in the town of Dunbar. He's not viewed as the Lord Protector, far from it. He may not be as brutal as he was at Drogheda, but people still suffered in 1650 at the Battle of Dunbar when his English army killed thousands of Scottish soldiers and thousands more were captured. They were marched south, many dying en route. They were taken to Durham Cathedral, where thankfully now a memorial recognises what they suffered. Many died in incarceration there. Those who were released thereafter, some were given by the Lord Protector to the Army of France. Others were sent to do drainage work in what's the area of the Wash in southern England. Others still were transported to Barbados and to the Americas. But some good did come from this, Madam Deputy Speaker, because in 1657, 7 years after serving their penal servitude, some of those Scottish soldiers banded together to form the Scots Charitable Society of what is now Boston. It is argued to be one of the oldest such charitable organisation, not just in the United States, but in the Western Hemisphere. They keep contacts with the community in Dunbar, and indeed so do the Scottish Prisoners of War Association, because such an organisation does exist with many American members, and they had a reenactment of the battle last year. But you can move along the A1 as well as you can move along the corridors here, because moving along the A1 some 15 miles I come to the small town of Tranent. Equally, moving along the corridors here, I came upon a recognition of the Earl of Liverpool. I think there's both a bust and indeed a painting to him. The Earl of Liverpool is the third longest serving Prime Minister, but in the town of Tranent in 1797 he's better recalled because he was a British military commander when the massacre of Tranent took place. 12 men, women and children were slain because they opposed the imposition of conscription. The Prime Minister, or the Earl of Liverpool, was then the military commander for East Central Scotland. He wasn't responsible for the order to fire, but he was culpable and indeed took the blame according to the Lord Advocate. But he obviously went on to greater things, and he became the Prime Minister in 1820, and his links with Scotland there do not end. Because in 1820, and we will be celebrating the bicentenary this year, because it's not just the 700th anniversary of the declaration of Arbroath, when my country's nationhood was enshrined by those who cherish it and have it at its heart. It's also the 200th anniversary of the 1820 Rising or Insurrection, when working people in Scotland campaigning and demanding the universal franchise, and indeed having seen what had happened just the year before in Peterloo, pledged that they would not just take it lying down. We will remember them. The Earl of Liverpool was remembered because he signed the death warrant for John Baird, Andrew Hardy and James Wilson. He had them hung and then beheaded, the last time such punishment was used in the United Kingdom. But we will remember them in April because they fought, as I say, for the universal franchise, for the right of working people, as honourable members mentioned earlier, to have that vote. 19 others, including a child, were transported to Botany Bay. Only 2 made it home to their native land. Centuries on, of course, we have the universal franchise. Not just working men, but working women have the right to vote. It's for that reason that I and my colleagues are in this chamber today. I have no doubt if it was the same as it had been in 1820, it would have been a representative of the rich landlords, because it was an oligarchy of them back then. But we do face challenges, because the Tory government is no more reflective of the people of Scotland now than arguably they were under Henry Dundas. That is why I will continue to emulate the good constituency work of those of my own party and indeed of others to represent the fine people of East Lothian. But equally, I will remember the memories of those who went before, who struggled for our native land to retain its identity, to advance the interests of working people. And indeed, as I come to the conclusion of my speech, I remember that one of the banners that was marched under by those who went to their doom in 1820 was Scotland free or a desert. As we sit in a debate on a Queen's speech that talks about a transformative agenda, many in my constituency, especially the most vulnerable, fear what will happen to the welfare state and the NHS, the gains made by our parents and our grandparents. We will, as with our forebearers, defend the rights of working people, the gains that we are entitled to expect, and we will defend our nationhood. I thank you for your indulgence, Madam Deputy Speaker.